5. Like, I just think that it just sets up here for the Suns to take it. And crazy enough, I don't know if you guys saw it on Twitter, but there was a big bet on this game that has made the betting splits be heavily favored for the Suns. 300K down, -6 on the Suns. I'm leaning in that direction just because it's at home and they've had this like horrible 2 games in Dallas and the teams have all won the home game. So long-winded way of saying I like the Suns tonight, and I think the Warriors would probably beat the Suns in a 7-game series.
I have a generic take. It has no relation to a line or DFS, but I thought about this the other day. The amount of whining's not the right word. I think the amount of outrage that Chirag is speaking to. You think back now since LeBron was when LeBron was in Cleveland. We kind of knew every year that it was going to be Cleveland, Golden State. Then we knew it was going to be Golden State for sure in the finals against someone out of the Eastern Conference, likely LeBron. I feel like fans of the league and even the league itself, officials especially, I don't think we're used to the fact that it's wide open. Is that fair to say? Like, I think now there's outrage each and every night, with home court being a factor, of course. But I think in a way, the fact that the playing field is so even, now folks are paying attention more than ever because they feel like, wow, maybe we'll get a different champion. Now, I know we had last year. I realize that, but I think folks are really starting to understand. And there's exceptions. Like Milwaukee, Brooklyn last year was a great series. But for the most part, the lead up to the finals, pretty boring in the NBA the last 5, 6, 7 years. Now we're in the semifinals of both conferences, and both series in each conference leading up to the conference finals, there's some juice. All of these series, there's a legitimate case to be made that any one of them could win these series. So that's what I think is going on here. And now the officials are becoming the punished group, because now, like Chirag said, it's turned into this argument. It's not good for the league. It's coming down to the officiating. And as a general fan of the game, if you're new to the NBA and you're just trying to be you're a casual fan, and you're watching these games for the first time, what Chirag is talking about is not good for the casual viewer, because it's like, oh my, if that's what we're going to do here, then okay, well, game 5, clearly Phoenix is going to win game 5. And then there will be some whining. I mean, Milwaukee's GM did it the other day, or maybe it was Milwaukee's owner, not GM. I can't remember who it was. And like, I get it. Like they say, he said the right thing. The Bucks upper management, we'll just say, made a complaint about the officiating. And they mentioned the Celtics to make it fair, so it didn't seem like they were just whining about their own team. It's a long way of me saying I think it's proving that I think people are getting frustrated throughout the league, whether you're a player in the league now, if you're a casual player, not in the playoffs now, just watching. The title's up for grabs. Whereas previous years, it's like, okay, Golden State's just really good. They're going to get to the finals, and this isn't even worth discussion. And LeBron's going to steamroll through the East. Now it's like there's just tension every night, which is kind of a good thing. But I can see the negative side of it too, that like we just overreact every 2 games. And I say every 2 games because there's 2 games in Phoenix, then there's 2 games in Dallas, and there's 2 games in Milwaukee, and there's 2 games in Boston, or there's 2 games in Philly, and 2 games in Miami. Rant over, but just point being, I think there's just I think there's more interest now. I think teams are like, we have a chance, like we can actually win this thing, and no one really knows who's going to win this thing. So you guys get what I'm trying to say? Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I agree with part of that, and I think maybe we should talk about like the conference futures and kind of work backwards from there, because I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk about tonight's games. But to the point of it being wide open this year, I totally agree. Like there isn't one team that's above the pack, but the thing I guess I would disagree with a little bit is that it's ever different. I think there were years where the Warriors were super dominant, but I think I have my years right. Like if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt hitting a game winner over Golden State in the conference finals, like maybe the Rockets make the finals over the Warriors. Like in hindsight, it's always going to seem like it was more obvious than it actually was. And yes, the Warriors were the best team for a while. but I don't think anyone really expected the Raptors to win that year going into the playoffs. And then last year, the Suns were literally underdogs in the first round against the Lakers and made it to the finals. So maybe this is more of a recent trend. Maybe it's not. But either way, I do agree. Like, it's very open, and just about any team that's remaining is good enough to win, except maybe Memphis. You know, if Ja Morant's not playing, maybe it's not Memphis. But just to go back to the point about the Warriors and why I think they're super overvalued, I don't think that what the Warriors have done so far in the playoffs is at all an indication of their ability as a team. I think it's much more about the quality or lack thereof with their opponents. I mean, they got a first round series matchup with the Denver Nuggets, who are like barely a playoff caliber team, despite the fact that they have the best player in the NBA. Denver's roster is terrible. And any indication I gave earlier this year that I thought Denver was a dark horse team, it was entirely contingent on Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. being healthy in the playoffs. Like, without those two guys, Jokic is basically playing with a bunch of players who don't deserve to be starters in the NBA. So that was a really easy matchup for Golden State. And then in the second round, there were some close games there. And then Morant got hurt. And if Dylan Brooks just plays like a competent fourth quarter, we're looking at a 2-2 series. Steven Adams wasn't there for the first 3 games. I think his presence made a big difference in game 4, but obviously without Morant, you know, there's just only so much they can do. Like, the Warriors are playing pretty well, and the Grizzlies roster without Morant right now, like, it's decent, but it's not great. So this was not that hard of a series matchup either. And I don't see any reason why we should assume that Golden State is now better than Phoenix, who just like lapped them basically in the Pacific Division in the regular season. I think the Suns are still clearly a much better team. And then the last point on this, like, if you want to make the case that the Warriors are more likely to go to the finals because the Suns still have the Mavericks to contend with.
Yep.
I think that everything we've seen from Dallas indicates that the Mavericks are a real contender too. I mean, Luka's playing his best basketball of his career right now. The role players are fitting in really well. The deadline move of getting rid of Porzingis, not just to bring in Dinwiddie, but also getting Bertans and opening up the court space and playing time for Maxi Kleba. Like, all of this seems to be working really, really well. So if I'm being honest, like, I'm not even sure that the Warriors are better than the Dallas Mavericks. I don't know where that argument would necessarily come from, other than we're used to seeing the Warriors there. And
right. Experience, proven track record as an organization.
Yeah. And all of that is true, but Klay Thompson is not the player he used to be. He has not played great in the playoffs. And now the Warriors' best shutdown defender, I mean, Draymond Green is the quarterback of the defense, and he's their most important defensive player, but their best perimeter defender, who would likely have been tasked with guarding Chris Paul, Devin Booker, or Luka Doncic in a playoff series, Gary Payton II, likely is not playing the rest of this season. So that's a huge loss for them. They kind of got away with that loss because Morant didn't play game 4. So it's not hurting them right now, but in a series against the Suns or Mavericks, I think not having Payton is a huge deal. So the Suns, to me, are, you know, should be like 2-1 favorites over Golden State if that's the matchup. And I think Dallas maybe should be pick 'em or better against Golden State if that winds up being the matchup. The odds just don't reflect that. So to me, the fact that the Warriors are minus 120 to win the Western Conference is insane. No. Like, I think they should be lower than that, even against either the Mavericks or the Suns.
I guess that's just a projection of rest, right? If they win game 5 and wrap up that series and the Mavericks take the Suns to 7 potentially, or even 6, I don't know, but I know, I get what you're saying.
It's also the thing that we've talked about all year, though, where the public likes a team and the futures odds are just overinflating that team, like we saw with the Lakers at the beginning, and then the Nets for a while, and the Warriors, I think, are just the same thing, where the futures odds are just not reflective of what the team is going to be once we actually get to a series where that team is playing.
Before we get into the nitty gritty of the 2 games tonight, look, I'm a Celtics honk, okay, admittedly. The Milwaukee Bucks are plus 800 to win the championship. Sixers plus 1,600. Mavs 2,200. Do either of you see value in any of these, considering all of those series are 2-2?
I'll let Sherrod give a more detailed view here, but the Mavs for sure. I think even Phoenix is a little undervalued, and then Philly's undervalued. So we'll get to that game eventually, but I think the Sixers are undervalued across the board too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree there that Philly is definitely undervalued. I honestly took a bet that they were going to win the championship after the Harden trade. I expected Harden to find his groove and play and be the Kobe to Embiid's Shaq. So that was my upside to this team. And obviously that's really ridiculous of a comparison because you can't really compare. But after the way Harden played last night, I'm going to say maybe we found old Harden and the way Embiid's been playing through injury. And it's like, sure, he might not go out and drop 40 on you right now, but the upside of what he can do and when he's locked in, there's not very many players in the league. I mean, sure, Giannis can maybe try to step in front of him, but I don't want it. There's not many players. Like the Celtics, they don't really have the size to deal with him. So like he's the big X factor remaining in the playoffs. And Luka Doncic on the other end, just the way this team plays and it's come together. I'm like, honestly, it's a bit of a shock. Like you bring in Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans and say your team got better, but yes, it's addition by subtraction. Spencer Dinwiddie is not going to be your championship piece that throws you over the top, but just the way the collection of the pieces come together and the allowing Luka to not have to be on the ball a million plays in a row, that definitely helps as well. And I think there's a chance if Dallas is able to upset, you're going to see these odds shift majorly. So the value right now definitely does fall on the Sixers and the Bucks, but I'm leaning that the Celtics are going to finish out the Sixers and the Mavs have the value, and I don't think it's worth it to bet the Bucks.
Since the hunkered down, stay at home days of playing NBA DFS, because I had nothing else better to do, another player who has been tremendous is Jalen Brunson. Like that's when I feel like Jalen Brunson started to come on the scene as a well-known name. You know, you got to get this guy in your lineup. You know, he's in that 45 to 50 something $100 player, and turns out he's their second leading scorer in this playoff series. So he's been dynamite as well, Jalen Brunson. But let's keep in mind, as you know, we talk about Golden State not shooting well in their last game. Well, are we really expecting the Mavericks to hit whatever it was, 20-something threes on nearly 50% shooting?
That's their game. That's their game. That's literally what they built their team around.
Sure, but like to ask them to do that again in a game 5 going back to Phoenix?
The Suns are a great defensive team. They'll probably make some adjustments. I mean, just to be clear, like I don't think the Mavericks are going to win tonight. I lean that way on the spread. I think it's just a stay away for me ultimately, because I do worry that the officiating skews Phoenix and the motivation skews Phoenix. If it wasn't for that, I would like Dallas to cover. But with all of those things considered, I think it's just a stay away spot. And this line is actually pretty solid at 6.5. Yeah, it's just a lean on Dallas. But I do think the Suns win. What I'm really saying is I think both of these teams are way undervalued for a potential Warriors matchup. And that's why I like the future bets on them. So if I had a Warriors minus 120 Western Conference ticket right now, I'd be hitting the cash out button without hesitation. I think that'd be the easiest decision in the world. And then maybe we should pivot over to the other game tonight. But if I had Heat plus 250, I'd be hitting the cash out button there even faster. Like, I think that line is totally ridiculous. And
to win the conference.
I mean, this series is a coin flip right now. The series line is pretty close to even. And yet Miami's plus 250 to win the East and Philly's plus 550 to win the East. And they're being priced pretty close to each other on the series line. Like, something is off here. And what I think is going on is that we just haven't seen enough of a correction on the futures odds, which is basically always the theme for these things, right? Like when we try to figure out, okay, the series line and the game line is telling us one story, and the futures odds are telling us a different story. Right. Which story is right? The current odds there's more reason for those to be priced properly. And the futures odds take longer to catch up. And I think that's, again, what we're seeing here. Like, Miami has no business being plus 250 to win the conference. Like, honestly, plus 250 sounds like a fair.
Just to be clear, you're saying those odds should be longer. They should be closer to where Philly is. Right.
Both those teams should be like in the 400s.
Gotcha.
I think Miami would be plus 250 in a series against Boston. And they're plus 250 to win this series, which is a coin flip, plus the series against either Boston or Milwaukee. And I'm not even sure which matchup would be easier next round, honestly, between the Bucks and the Celtics, because Chris Middleton probably plays if the Bucks advance. So both of those, like Miami's a pretty big underdog against either team. Like these odds are just ridiculous.
Even with home court?
He would have home court, but I don't think that matters enough. Like maybe they should be plus 200. Even if they get by this round, I still think plus 250 at that point is only marginally good. So this market, I think, is pretty far off. I have slight interest in Philly, but it's more about fading the Heat. The series line is much more reflective of what I actually think. But so I guess we'll shift to tonight. But even though I think the Heat have a very slight edge tonight, I still think the Sixers should be favored in the series at the moment.
Which that's almost, well, the series line, that's almost true.
It's almost true. So basically how I would frame it is Miami has, let's say, like a 51% chance to win tonight, and they'd have like a 50 whatever, like similar chance in game 7. But game 6 for Philly would be like a 65-35 probability, because the game is only close tonight because like it's only 50-50 because Miami's at home. Otherwise, Philly would be favored by a few points. Like if this were on a neutral court, the Sixers are better, especially with Kyle Lowry out, but I think they're better anyway. So the only reason the Heat are favored is because
they're at home.
Yep. And the Sixers will be bigger than 2.5 point favorites in their home game. So basically what it is Miami gets 2 potential home games. Philly only gets 1, but because Philly's the better team by enough, their 1 home game is worth that much more, that I think it more than makes up for the fact that Miami gets 2 of the potential 3 games on their home court. Because I just think the Sixers are a much better team right now.
Sixers, what was the closing line for Sixers Heat game 4?
-2, which is
-2.
Pretty close to what it was for game 3 also. But I think there was more concern for those games about Embiid's conditioning and health and all of that. He didn't look great in game 3. They won, but he was clearly pretty winded. But Kyle Lowry also played in both of those games, and he's not there now. So that's why the line is a little bit different than it was.
I think Lowry being out actually helps Miami, because Lowry's just kind of he didn't give him much in the 2 games.
It did.
But his defense, like Tyler Hero can't guard anybody.
Right. But it's crazy because your auto thing that to do during the regular season has, or for me at least, as I continue to grow as a sports bettor, has been, attack the news. This guy is out. Let's attack the other side of the spread because it's going to move in. And the thing that I've learned, like I when Kyle Lowry got ruled out, I took the other side and the Heat won that game. And it's like, wait, what did I do wrong here? And it's just like, it takes more repetitions and understanding, like, okay, this person is coming in, replacing him. How does this actually impact the line? And rather than just worrying about, I need to get this bet down before the line closes or it gets off the board because the news is breaking, like actually understanding potential of the things and also accepting to lose. Like just because you made a bet based on injury lineup news doesn't mean that a guy's not going to step up majorly in his place.
Well, just to be clear also, like I don't like the Sixers tonight just because Lowry's out. I like them anyway. I just like them more because he's out. It helps a little bit. So to Glash's point, like this is a banged up Kyle Lowry. I don't think he's a huge loss. I think he's a small loss, but I just don't think the Heat are as good as the Sixers with both teams at full strength. I also think like many of the Heat role players are playing injured. Like they're listing everyone as questionable every game. Guys like Strus and Martin and Dedmon off the bench and Hero to some extent. Like these guys are playing through injuries. The Sixers, aside from Embiid, look pretty healthy right now. So I think they have that going for them too. But just on the point of like how I could say I think the Heat, like gun to my head, will win, but yet I still like Philly. If the Sixers have a 49% chance, let's say 49.9% chance to win tonight, so I would lean a tiny bit towards the Miami side. Plus 130 is a good value at that probability. Like if it's basically a coin flip, plus 130 is the right side on the money line. 2.5 points on the spread is just more than it should be. Like I do think if I had to say who wins, I think it's a really hard call. I think this game is really close to a coin flip where on the one hand, Philly is the better roster. On the other hand, the Heat are in a bounce back spot and they are at home. And I think those sort of cancel out and we get a very even game. So It's not that I expect Philly to win this game. It's that I think plus 130 is good value for this game. And it's really like, I think it's close to a toss up. And if Miami was plus 130, I'd be betting the Heat tonight. Like, it's just, I think this line should be basically a pickup.
I've got some pride in Eric Spoelstra tonight. Eric Spoelstra, 11-1, straight up as a playoff favorite since LeBron James left the Miami Heat. So I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in home favorites in these playoffs are 33-9. 33-9 straight up. Okay. I'm a believer in that. Your points are true, Meiselman. It's fair. And they're a different team. The Sixers are a different team with Embiid. It also comes down to what is James Harden going to have a game close to what he just had in game 4? I don't know if we're going to get that James Harden.
Quick point on Harden. I think there's a massive synergy element to Embiid and Harden, just in the sense that you can't double James Harden when Embiid's playing.
Yeah.
Like, he looked so bad in the first 2 games because the whole defense is watching him. Yep. And he's not the guy at this point in his career who can be that ball dominant primary scorer. Everyone's focusing on him. He just doesn't have that burst anymore to like excel in that role. But in the role where he's the second option, like, there's no reason to think he can't do that. He's been great in that role for the last 2 or 3 years. So
can we blame Mike D'Antoni because he ruined Amari Stoudemire's knees? He ruined Kobe's Achilles. He burnt James Harden so many games where they were up 20 points and he was there in the fourth quarter just like running up and down the court. Because
I like it. Blame D'Antoni.
I mean, I honestly thought about this. Like, that's how far back, like, I was like, you know, what if Harden had a little bit more burst and why did he not? Well, like, D'Antoni literally ran him every single game, regardless of the score. He was leading the league in minutes. And
Doc Rivers is really relieved that we're not focusing on him and just from years ago. Right? Because all the blame should be on him. But, you know, Embiid got injured in a 29-point game with 4 minutes left against the Raptors. So
too. Yeah,
we can just shed the blame to someone else. I think that.
No, but I was thinking about Harden. But yeah, the other part of it was when Doc left in the other guys when they were up the other night. Also, like, they were up 15, and it was like, wait, did you not learn? Did you not learn? What are you doing right now? But that's just, I mean, it's weird because a lot of these coaches wait for the opposing coach to wave the white flag before pulling their guys, even if they're up 15, 18, 20 with 4 minutes left in the fourth.
All right. We'll see. I mean, look, and the other thing too is we talked about some of these role guys. Meiselman brought up some of the role guys that are banged up from Miami. If the role guys from Miami go home and get their shooting touch back, the Heroes, the Oladipos, you know, they turn their shooting woes around at home. And if you don't get production from the likes of Harris, Green, or Maxey, I mean, Maxey's a little different. He's not just a shooter. He can certainly get his own shot too. That's a factor. So we'll see. I mean, but home court's been a thing in these 2 series, no question. Two different. We're seeing 2 different versions of all of these teams. To and
well,
from.
It is literally 2 different versions.
Literally,
because their last 2 games in Miami had no Joel Embiid. So this is a
news came out for the Heat.
Team.
They are literally all available to play, but Hero ankle, Vincent knee, Dedmon an illness, Martin an ankle, Strus a hammy, Tucker a calf. It's like, you're all available, but just as Matt said, like, you guys are just playing through stuff.
Can we change just a very, very quick thing? The NBA injury reporting is insane. Like, John Morant was doubtful yesterday. No one thought he was going to play. Embiid was doubtful for game 3 of this.
And everyone thought he was going to play.
And it's the same tag. And like, we know. We have to now guess what there was no chance that PJ Tucker was going to be out tonight. He's listed questionable for no reason. I think Embiid is still technically questionable tonight too. There's a 100% chance that Embiid's playing unless he gets COVID in the next 2 hours.
And I think it's just like, you have to report them in the event that something happens. But then we've seen, just like Robert Williams last night, was he on the injury report? Yeah, he's been dealing with the knee, but he ended up was a starter and was pretty much crashed with the last minute because he felt weird in warmups, right?
Yeah. Couple things I want to get to in Phoenix, Dallas. The narrative of Chris Paul has not had a great last 2 games, right? 17 points combined in games 3 and 4. Game 3 was more of a turnover game for Chris Paul. Just didn't play all that well. Game 4, if you watched it, if you didn't watch it, he picked up a lot of fouls and a lot of weird fouls, like wrong place, wrong time. Then you got the whole thing with his family. So it was his mom and his wife, I think, that were just not great in Dallas. That the Mavericks put out a statement, but there's some video now coming out. There's literal poking of the bear, if you will, poking the bear of Chris Paul. Like, of course, the Mavs didn't do it. It's the Mavs fan base, but as if this guy needed any more motivation. Am I missing something here? Why is his points prop only 16.5 tonight? That to me, and now it's at minus 135. That opened at minus 115. This to me is like Chris Paul's having a big game tonight. Like, come on.
Is he having a big game scoring though, or is he just having a big game? Because if I told you that
he'll get his mid-range looks,
Sure,
and correct me, I think Sharag may have said this. I could be wrong, so I apologize if I'm putting words in your mouth. The officiating might swerve back the other way, and there's a chance Chris Paul's going to get some free throws tonight too.
He doesn't draw a lot of shooting fouls.
He doesn't,
generally, though. Like,
did you say draw? Is that a
draw? He said draw. No, he said draw.
Okay.
Draw fouls. Yeah.
I thought there was a little Philly in you there. Draw with the WL.
We're on the internet. Sometimes it just sounds weird. Or maybe I am rooting for the Sixers tonight, and it's just coming out of me. Maybe that's what's happening here. No, I think that if we didn't have the narratives, Chris Paul's points prop should only be around 15. Like, the baseline for him is not that. He's had games with single-digit scoring in this year's playoffs. Yep. His scoring was up because Devin Booker was out.
Yep.
And
he's hit this over, though, in 7 of 10 playoff games.
Yeah, Devin Booker missed, like, how many of those?
I don't know. Off the top of my head.
I think 6 of them, something like that. Is that
6?
Right? The Pelicans were also a much better matchup than the Mavericks, who play slower and are better defensively. The Pelicans are a decent defensive team, but they also play incredibly fast. And the Mavericks are going out of their way to have Reggie Bullock pick up Chris Paul the whole length of the court, where they're basically trying to take Paul out of the game more than they're trying to take Booker out of the game. So I'm not really sure why they're doing that, but matchup-wise, this is a terrible situation for him in terms of scoring points. I think, like, if this were the line and the events of last game had not happened, I would be betting the under. Like, this is too high of a line for the standard Chris Paul situation. I think the reason to look at the over is 100% fueled by narrative, which I understand. And because of that, I'm just going to stay away from it because I don't know how this situation is going to play out. But I don't like this spot for Chris Paul scoring points other than the fact that he might be extra juiced up from what's happened recently. Yeah. So he may score 20 something because he wants to show everyone up, or he may just play really well and have a 13-point, 16 assist game. And, like, I don't think any of us would really be that shocked by that happening because the Mavs are trying to prevent him from having the ball in his hands. The Suns' offense operates at its best when Chris Paul is facilitating, and they're trying to wear him out. And then also, this is, I guess, a little bit of a weak concern, but we saw the game where Chris Paul was amazing in the fourth quarter in game 2. He went to the bench with 6 minutes left. Like, if Phoenix is up 15 or so points with mid fourth quarter, he's out of the game. Like, he doesn't stay in with the rest of the starters for the stretch run. Maybe that changes because of, the way he's feeling.
And he played 23 minutes in game 4. He didn't.
He's
play.
rested. I know.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if the game is, like, out of hand, he's the first guy to leave the floor while Booker, Bridges, and Ayton will stay in a few minutes longer before they really go to the bench. Like, Chris Paul's minutes are generally lower than everyone else on the Suns starting lineup for that reason. So I'm basically giving all the reasons to be worried about this, but I understand there are psychological things at play here that could indicate that a big game is on the horizon. So I don't have a lot of confidence either way, which happens. I'm just kind of laying out the devil's advocate case of, like, why is this line not higher? It's because it shouldn't be unless Chris Paul is, like, extra fired up, and then it makes sense to bet the over.
Meiselman is Sharag. He's pro smart, anti-fun. And that's what that explanation was.
You're not going to get Matt to be about the fun. Matt is. I know it's a good.
I'm not criticizing him. I'm pointing out.
I'm wearing an Isaiah Stewart jersey. How can you have more fun than that?
If you were to get a cut, he would bleed in oil and not in blood because he's a robot.
Come on.
No, it's good. He's right. I don't like how he did all that after I may not have invested in Chris Paul to be the game's leading scorer tonight. 35-1.
I like that better. Just to be like, I like the alternate lines better here.
I want to show people that Chris Paul, if you think Chris Paul is going to go out and get revenge tonight on this Mavs team, not really the Mavs, but the fan base, and just have a vintage Chris Paul night, because I can't unsee it. It's 35-1 to be the game's leading scorer. I know Luka's on the other side, but keep in mind, the Mavericks have won their 2 games with Luka shooting a worse percentage and scoring less points per game. Just saying.
You want to make sure that what's crazy to add to this is that Chris Paul's points prop is the 3rd most bet on DraftKings Sportsbook tonight.
It's not
Everyone's doing this, right? Everyone's on the same thing. Well, I think the important thing to like tie it together on the narratives is that it's my understanding, and I think this is like sort of common knowledge in terms of analytics, is that narratives increase variance, which means you're just more likely to get an outlier outcome if something weird is going on. And clearly we have something weird going on with Chris Paul's family being, I don't want to say attacked, but involved in an incident in game 4, plus the deal with the officials, with him fouling out, with him probably being a little extra angry going into this game. That could just mean he shoots more bad shots and plays worse.
Yep,
like that could also mean that. So that's why I think taking the 35-1 for game's leading scorer is a much better idea than betting over 16.5 points at -135. Because we don't know, like this could be an extreme game in either direction, but I don't think the average game here is affected too much by what's happening. Like if the game starts out normal, which is somewhat likely, then, you know, there's no reason to expect Chris Paul to be the Suns' leading scorer, because Booker and Ayton are usually their 2 main scorers. So if you want to take an alternate line on Paul, 20 points or 25 points, or do something like this where you take him to be the game's leading scorer, I think that capitalizes on the idea of that variance and the unknown. And I like that a lot better than just laying juice over on the regular points prop.
You're right.
You hate laying the juice, period.
Well, and to be fair, and I want to shout out colleague of ours, Julian Edlow. One of Edlow's best bets tonight was at -115. So at -135, is it? What's that?
It's certainly better at -115.
Well, yeah, right. The other thing, what was I going to say? The other thing, too, I'm expecting in this game, if Monty Williams, coach of the year, by the way, named coach of the year, they've got to get Ayton more involved offensively, right? Scoring wise, like that they've got to manipulate that mismatch and take advantage of it. I don't think they did not do it well enough in the 2 games in Dallas.
Yeah, I think that's true. And like when the Suns made their run last year, Ayton was an enormous part of that in terms of scoring. He had probably the craziest alley-oop that anyone's ever had off the inbounds play that won the game.
To win the game.
So like, I guess we're not going to replicate that, but no, I think it's a fair point. Like the Suns need more from everybody. But yeah, my concerns with Paul it's just like the best version of the Suns is Devin Booker as their leading scorer with Chris Paul as the primary facilitator. And if this were a regular season game, I'd probably buy the Paul anger narrative more, because like winning wouldn't be as important in that case. But like the Suns need to win, and they'll do whatever it takes to win. And if that means Chris Paul just plays better defense, like maybe he takes out all his anger guarding Luka and he doesn't take it out on the offensive end. So if he scores 28 points tonight, I'm not going to be shocked. But if he scores 8 points tonight, I'm not going to be shocked either.
Yeah.
He could, I mean, and I wouldn't be shocked if he dropped triple-double also.
Yeah, he might do more rebounding, more pass. Yeah, he could just be more involved in general, but that doesn't necessarily mean more scoring.
Yeah.
And it looks like Ja Morant is not going to be back, so we're going to see some movement from tomorrow's Grizzlies.
What do you got for us?
We got a doubtful for the rest of the playoffs due to a bone bruise in his knee.
Who is that a report? Who's
coming from everywhere.
Grizzlies PR.
Yeah, it's coming from everyone now, though.
Yeah.
And the line is off the board. Okay,
you got to do it.
I guess that's a good time now to wrap the show, because I don't think that's going to pop up soon.
No.
Right.
I'll just quickly say Memphis +5 or whatever it gets to. I like that a lot once it corrects, but I would have liked the smaller number if Morant was playing. But yeah, the series is likely over even if Memphis wins game 5.
It was +2 initially, right?
Yeah, that was probably going to be about where it was with Morant playing. Now we'll see it move by about 3 points without him, I think.
Okay, so if you liked Golden State Hope you got in on it now, or
Yeah.
hope you got it early. Because
Don't get it late though.
yeah,
Minus
don't
5
get it
won't be
late.
good
Right.
anymore.
If you got the what's funny about just last thing, that was moving from 3.5 to 3, and then it was at 2. It was at 2 like when we started the show. So
I think people were starting to speculate that he was coming back. So this is sort of a surprise. I thought he'd be back for game 5. I think Shrag also thought he'd be back for game 5. This is not what we were expecting.
Okay. Anything else before we go? You guys good?
Good.
So Suns and Heat win.
Suns probably win.
I still think there's a chance the Sixers can pull it out. I don't see what Miami does magically to shift that. But Suns, if the Suns don't have at least 20 to 25 free throws in this game, I'm going to think something's wrong.
Okay. I agree. The first game's going to be good. Miami and Philadelphia should be good. All right. That's it. Thank you all for joining us. Should be a great